The richest man in the room was dying, and his own board members just watched. Only a waitress nobody respected stepped in, and that choice rewrote his empire. Amara Johnson was only 24, but life had already carved deep lessons into her. Raised by a single mother in Detroit, she carried the weight of her younger brother's future on her shoulders. Working nights in catering, she walked into that skyscraper conference room expecting only to serve coffee. The room was filled with men in $1,000 suits. Billionaire CEO Raymond Whitmore sat at the head of the table, his voice booming over polished oak. Amara moved carefully, balancing trays, her eyes down, trained to stay invisible. That was when everything changed in a heartbeat. Raymond's words cracked mid-sentence. His face twisted in pain. He clutched his chest, knocking over his glass of water. Silence spread like a disease. Executives froze, eyes darting, hands still gripping pens. Not one of them moved an inch toward the man dying before them. Amara's tray rattled against her hand. She dropped the coffee and ran forward. Her heart pounded as she shouted, "Call 911!" The men only stared. Some whispered. One even leaned back, annoyed at the disturbance. Their billionaire leader was crumbling, and still they sat paralyzed. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone. She dialed, her voice cracking as she yelled into the receiver. She could see Raymond's lips turning pale, his fingers clawing at the table, his body sliding down in slow motion. Still, not a single executive lifted a hand. The call connected. Amara screamed into the phone for paramedics, her own tears blinding her vision. She dropped to her knees beside Raymond, begging him to hold on. His gasps rattled the air. He reached toward her as if she were the only soul in the room. Then his face turned purple. His eyes rolled back, and the line on his chest seemed to vanish as the phone rang in her hand. Amara hadn't always been this brave. In fact, she had spent most of her life learning how to survive in silence. Born to a mother who worked double shifts at a nursing home, she knew poverty like an unwanted relative who never left the house. Her father was gone by the time she was 8, leaving nothing but promises he never kept. She learned quickly that the world didn't care about fairness. What kept her steady was her younger brother, Isaiah, a bright 17-year-old with dreams of becoming an engineer. His future depended on her. That morning, she had thought the catering job might bring in enough to help with Isaiah's college fund. It wasn't glamorous, but she believed that steady work mattered. She carried herself with quiet pride, even when the executives barely looked at her as human. She remembered how one of them joked earlier, calling her the help, as if her name didn't exist. She smiled politely, pretending it didn't sting. She had gotten used to these small cuts, the kind that left no bruise but lingered all the same. Now, standing in the center of chaos, she saw those same men whispering to each other. One even pushed her back when she leaned closer to Raymond. "Step aside," he hissed. "You don't know what you're doing." His cold eyes dared her to try again. But she did. She pressed her hands on Raymond's chest, whispering to herself, remembering the day her father had collapsed at home, and no one had acted fast enough. She refused to watch another man die while others stood still. The sound of her sobs echoed through the boardroom as Raymond's breathing grew shallow. And still, no sirens, no paramedics. Only the thundering silence of executives waiting for her to fail. Amara's hands trembled as she pressed her palms against Raymond's chest, counting beats. She had watched CPR videos years ago in health class, never thinking she would need them. Now, with each push, she prayed, "Stay with me. Please." Her voice cracked like glass. One of the men leaned in, sneering. "Stop it before you kill him." His voice was full of disgust, as if her touch was poison. Another muttered, "She's just a waitress." Not one of them lifted a finger to help. They let their leader suffocate in pride and fear. The memory of her father's final moments stabbed her heart. She had been just a child, frozen as he gasped for air. She had watched him slip away while neighbors stood around whispering. That guilt had never left her, and she swore it would not happen again. Her arms ached, but she pressed harder, her breath sinking with the desperate rhythm of chest compressions. She didn't care if they mocked her. She didn't care if her hands broke bones. She was all he had in this moment, and she refused to stop. Sweat dripped down her face. Tears blurred her vision. The world outside the boardroom might as well not exist. It was only her, the dying man, and the suffocating silence of cowards in tailored suits. Every second felt like a lifetime. Then, the moment she dreaded came. Raymond's body went still. His chest stopped rising. No faint gasp. No flicker of breath. His eyes rolled back completely, and his lips parted as if releasing his last plea. And Amara realized with horror that she was holding the body of a man who was no longer breathing at all. The crash of doors broke the silence. Paramedics stormed into the room, bags swinging, voices sharp and commanding. Amara stumbled back, her chest heaving, her hands trembling as if they belonged to someone else. The professionals surrounded Raymond, working quickly, taking over what she had started. The executives sighed with relief as though the crisis were already over. Some even adjusted their ties, pretending they had helped. One man muttered, "Finally!" Their indifference cut deeper than any blade. They looked at Amara like she was in the way, like her panic was an inconvenience. She wiped her tears, her uniform stained with spilled coffee and sweat. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched the paramedics struggle. She whispered prayers under her breath, clutching her hands together, still ignored by the people whose lives she had just shaken. Raymond's breathing returned faintly under the paramedics' efforts. The room exhaled in unison, and yet not a single person looked her way. She was invisible again, the girl who had dared to care too much in a room full of statues. As the stretcher rolled past her, Amara felt her knees wobble. She had saved his life, at least for now, but none of them would admit it. They would rewrite the story without her, as though her hands had never touched him. And then one of the executives, tall and gray-haired, leaned close enough for only her to hear. His whisper dripped venom. "You'll regret interfering. People like you don't belong here." The sterile smell of disinfectant filled the hospital as Raymond lay connected to tubes and machines. The monitors beeped in uneven rhythms, each sound a reminder that life was fragile even for billionaires. Doctors whispered grimly outside his room. He might not survive the night. Amara sat in the waiting area, her uniform wrinkled, her eyes heavy from tears. She debated slipping out quietly. She didn't want trouble. She had done her part. Maybe it was safer to vanish before anyone twisted the story against her. That thought weighed heavy on her chest. But when a nurse approached her, the words froze her in place. "He asked for you," the nurse said softly. Amara blinked in disbelief. "The man you helped. He wants to see the waitress who called 911. Her heart skipped. Why would a billionaire want to see her? She followed the nurse down the long hallway, her footsteps echoing louder than her courage. Her palms were damp, her body tense, every step feeling like a test. She wondered if his family was inside, waiting to judge her presence again. And she was right. The moment she stepped into the room, the eyes of Raymond's executives locked on her like daggers. They stood in suits, arms crossed, their glares sharp enough to pierce. They did not welcome her. They wanted her gone. But Raymond stirred, his voice hoarse, his hand weakly lifting. "No, she stays," he whispered. The men shifted uncomfortably, but his eyes never left Amara's face. And as Amara stepped closer to his bed, the room thick with hostility, Raymond's pale lips formed words that would silence them all. Raymond's voice was faint but carried weight. "She stays. All of you, leave." The executives hesitated, their eyes flashing anger, but one by one they shuffled out of the hospital room, unwilling to challenge a dying man. Amara stood frozen, unsure why he wanted her there. She moved closer, her heart pounding. Raymond's skin was pale, his breath shallow. Yet his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that unnerved her. "You saved me," he whispered. "No one else moved. Just you." His words were more than gratitude, they were confession. The executives had dismissed her earlier as if she were invisible. They wanted to erase her from the story. But now, lying weak and broken, their billionaire leader admitted the truth they tried to bury. Amara's chest tightened, torn between disbelief and an odd sense of dignity. "Don't think this room will forgive you," he said with effort. "They hate that you acted. But I—" His words caught in his throat. His eyes filled with something that looked almost like shame. It wasn't the face of a ruthless man. It was the face of someone haunted. For a moment, Amara saw not a billionaire, but a frail human being terrified of being forgotten. His trembling hand reached for hers, and she let him hold it, even as her instincts screamed to pull away. She was caught between fear and compassion. His breath rattled as he whispered, "I need to tell you, before it's too late." His voice broke, his lips trembling as though carrying a secret buried for decades. And before Amara could answer, he tightened his grip and forced out words that would change everything. "I must change, my will." Raymond's eyes closed briefly, his chest rising in shallow gasps. In that fragile silence, Amara wondered if he would slip away before finishing his thought. Then his lips moved again, his words dragging her into a story she never expected to hear. He spoke of his past. A small-town boy turned ruthless businessman, Raymond built his empire by crushing competitors, breaking partnerships, and neglecting his own family. "I was feared," he admitted, his tone cracked with regret. "But when I collapsed in that room, no one cared enough to move." The confession chilled Amara. He had lived decades chasing power, yet it left him alone in his moment of need. No friend, no family, not even a loyal employee rushed to save him. Only the waitress carrying coffee trays. The irony was sharper than any blade. His eyes glistened. "I see now what I ignored all my life. Kindness. It's worth more than billions." For a second, Amara's heart softened, but a part of her remained guarded. This was the same man who likely ruined lives with a signature, and now he sought redemption on his deathbed. The silence stretched. Machines beeped in the background, reminding her this man had only hours, maybe days, left. His whisper grew urgent. "I must put things right. I cannot leave this world, the same man I was." Amara leaned in, torn between skepticism and pity. Could a man so hardened by greed truly change, or were these just the words of someone afraid of hell's gates? His voice cracked, forcing her closer. "Tomorrow, my lawyer will come. I'll decide then." His eyes opened wide, urgent with need. "But if I die before that, everything will be lost." And at that very moment, the monitor beside him began to scream. The night was long, but Raymond survived. Amara returned home the next morning, her mind heavy with questions. Her small apartment smelled of pancakes, and her younger brother Isaiah greeted her with a smile that almost broke her heart. He had no idea what she had lived through. Over breakfast, Isaiah rambled about college applications. His excitement filled the room with light, but Amara could not shake Raymond's voice from her mind. She thought about how he had whispered of wills, redemption, and regret. She wanted to forget him, yet curiosity gnawed at her. Isaiah noticed her silence. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he teased. But when she finally told him what happened, his face hardened. "Don't trust rich men, Amara. They use people. If he wants something from you, it won't be good." Be careful. His warning lingered like smoke. The evening came, and Amara sat on her worn couch scrolling through news headlines. Billionaire CEO near death after heart attack. Pictures of Raymond filled the screen, surrounded by men in expensive suits. Not once did the article mention the waitress who called 911. She was erased again. A knock rattled her door. She opened it cautiously, expecting a neighbor. Instead, a sharply dressed man stood there holding a briefcase. His voice was low, controlled. "Miss Johnson? Mr. Whitmore has requested your presence at his mansion. Immediately." Her heart skipped. A billionaire's lawyer at her door? She hesitated, but his expression carried no hint of patience. The choice felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. She looked back at Isaiah, his worried eyes begging her not to go. But something inside her whispered she couldn't turn away now. And when she stepped outside, she saw a black limousine waiting for her at the curb. The ride was silent, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. Amara clutched her hands together, unsure if she was stepping into opportunity or danger. The limousine wound its way into a gated estate so large it looked like a palace compared to her cramped apartment. Inside, Raymond waited, pale but determined. He sat in a chair by the fireplace, his body weak but his eyes alive. "You came," he said, almost in relief. She nodded, unsure what to say. She had never been inside a mansion, and the air itself felt heavy. Raymond's voice carried purpose. "I owe you more than words. You gave me a second chance. I want to give you something in return." He paused, coughing. "Your brother's education, consider it covered. Every expense." The offer struck Amara like thunder. Could he truly mean it? Her eyes welled with tears, but suspicion quickly followed. Why would a man like him care about her family? Was this gratitude, or guilt? The executives standing in the shadows glared at her as though she were a thief stealing what wasn't hers. Still, Raymond's words were steady. "I cannot change the past, but I can invest in the future." He handed her a folder, and she saw scholarship papers with Isaiah's name. Her heart raced, torn between gratitude and fear of strings attached. Before she could respond, Raymond's hand trembled. His chest heaved suddenly, violently. His glass of water shattered as it fell from the table. His eyes rolled back, and his body slumped in the chair. Amara screamed, rushing forward as the executives watched coldly, their arms folded. She was trapped once again in the nightmare of watching a man collapse before her eyes. Time froze as Amara fell to her knees beside him. "Stay with me, please!" Her voice echoed in the grand room. Raymond's lips quivered, his body trembling. The family rushed in, but their expressions weren't fear. They looked irritated, almost annoyed, as if this scene was nothing new. Amara pressed her hands against his chest, panic rushing back. She counted compressions, begging the man to fight. Around her, whispers rose like smoke. "She's overstepping. Why is she here? This isn't her place." None of them bent to help. She was alone again. The doctors arrived within minutes, pushing her aside with professional urgency. Amara backed away, her body trembling. Relief surged when Raymond began to breathe again, stabilized under their care. She leaned against the wall, her heart pounding, her soul weary of saving lives that didn't belong to her. She turned quietly to leave, feeling the weight of stairs burning her back. She thought if she slipped away now, maybe she could return to her small, ordinary life. But just as her hand touched the doorframe, voices rose behind her, sharp and venomous. Raymond's family began arguing over his fortune, their words slicing through the air. "The will needs revising. She's manipulating him. We can't let some waitress walk away with anything." Their cruelty wrapped around her like chains, each word a dagger meant for her. She wanted to disappear. But then, from the bed, a faint rasp broke through the chaos. Her name. Amara. His voice was barely a whisper, but it silenced the room. All eyes turned as his trembling hand pointed directly at her. And with every breath in the room held hostage, Raymond demanded, "Bring her to me." The room was heavy with silence as Amara stepped closer to Raymond's bed. His frail voice trembled. "Read this for me." He handed her a folded letter, his hand shaking as if it carried the weight of his entire life. She unfolded it slowly, every eye fixed on her. The words inside weren't business contracts or cold financial notes. They were confessions. Raymond admitted to abandoning his only daughter years ago, choosing his empire over family. He spoke of a child who grew up resenting him, and of nights he drowned in guilt, wondering if he'd ever be forgiven. Amara's throat tightened as she read aloud, her voice unsteady. The pain in those words mirrored her own childhood wounds. Her father had walked out too, leaving scars that never fully healed. It was strange how power and poverty created the same kind of emptiness. As she read, Raymond wept quietly, his body frail but his eyes pleading. The executives shifted uncomfortably, as if shame itself filled the room. They didn't want these truths spoken aloud, but Raymond refused to leave this world with his sins unspoken. Amara lowered the paper, her hands trembling. She wondered if redemption was real, if people like Raymond could truly find peace after a lifetime of cruelty. His breathing grew weaker, but he managed to whisper, "Don't let them erase me as a man who never cared." Before she could respond, the door slammed open. A woman stormed in, her face sharp with anger. "Enough!" she shouted. "I'm his daughter, and I will not stand here while some waitress pretends to understand him." The room froze, and Amara realized the battle for truth had only begun. Raymond's daughter stood tall, her voice dripping with venom. "Who are you to read his secrets? You're nothing but the help." The words cut deep, each syllable designed to humiliate. Amara stayed still, her chest heavy, but her eyes met the woman's with calm defiance. The room buzzed with tension. Raymond, weak and gasping, tried to speak. "Emily, stop." His daughter's name cracked through the silence, filled with years of distance and regret. Emily turned to him, her face trembling between rage and sorrow. "You don't know what this woman is doing to you." Amara didn't answer. She had no defense that would satisfy them. Instead, she chose silence, a strength that made Emily's fury burn hotter. The executives watched with interest, feeding off the conflict like vultures circling a wounded animal. Every second felt like a courtroom with no judge. Raymond coughed, his body shivering, but his voice was steady. "You think she's using me? No, she's the only one who acted when I was dying. Not you. Not them. Her." His words carried more weight than gold, slicing through the arrogance in the room. Emily's eyes glistened with tears, but her pride refused to soften. "You'll regret this. Your mind is clouded. She doesn't belong here." Amara felt the sting of her words, but she stood still, refusing to shrink. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Raymond's hand rose weakly, trembling in the air. "If I live through this, things will change. My company, my name, my legacy." He paused, gathering strength for words no one expected. His next breath came slow but sharp. "I am stepping down as CEO, and the one who carries my legacy will not be you." The announcement landed like a thunderclap. The executives erupted, voices colliding in outrage. "You can't do this! She's tricking you!" The room became a battlefield of anger and disbelief. Amara's heart pounded. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't expected to be thrust into a storm she didn't create. Raymond's voice cracked but stayed firm. I've seen the truth. My wealth means nothing without compassion. And she carries what I lost. His finger trembled as it pointed at Amara. Gasps filled the air. The family's fury burned brighter than fire. To them, she was an intruder stealing everything. Amara shook her head, her voice soft but steady. I never asked for this. I don't want your empire. But no one listened. The executives shouted over her, lawyers rushed in with papers, and Raymond's family hissed insults sharp enough to cut skin. The chaos grew unbearable. Amara edged toward the door, desperate to escape. She wanted to run back to her small apartment, her brother's laughter, her simple life. But just as she reached the hallway, a voice behind her broke the world into silence again. Don't leave, Raymond begged, his voice hoarse. You're the only one who can carry my name with kindness. His eyes searched hers, desperate for agreement. Amara froze, her body torn between flight and obligation, her soul aching with confusion. Then it happened. His body convulsed, his face drained of color, and the monitor beside his bed screamed. A flat line pierced the room, louder than the shouting, louder than the fear. Raymond Whitmore collapsed one final time, his body stiffening, his hands slipping from the bed. The doctors rushed in, their voices commanding. Clear the room! But it was too late. No shock, no medicine, no machine could bring back the man whose empire had ruled for decades. Raymond Whitmore was gone. His final breath had been taken while clutching Amara's name. The family stared coldly at her, their grief twisted into anger. To them, she was not the woman who tried to save him. She was the symbol of everything he had chosen instead of them. Their hatred poured silently across the room like poison through water. The funeral came days later. The church was filled with black suits, hushed whispers, and camera flashes. Executives delivered polished speeches about leadership and legacy, none daring to speak of the man who begged for kindness in his final days. Amara sat quietly in the back, invisible once more. Then came the will reading. The lawyer's voice carried through the mahogany room, every word striking like a hammer. Raymond had left wealth to his family, yes, but one part silenced them all, a foundation built in Amara's name. Scholarships, programs, opportunities for the forgotten, funded by his billions. Gasps erupted. Faces turned red with fury. His daughter slammed her hand against the table. This is madness. He was manipulated. She doesn't deserve this. The executives muttered, their eyes sharpening with promises of revenge. The air grew so heavy Amara thought she might suffocate. Her heart raced. She hadn't wanted any of this. All she had done was call for help, press her hands against the dying man's chest, and whisper prayers. And now she carried a fortune's weight on her shoulders. And as the lawyer closed the folder, one sentence echoed through the room. His family intends to fight this. Amara stood alone on the steps of the foundation's new building months later, the city skyline rising behind her. She never wanted wealth, never dreamed of influence. But Raymond's final gift had become a mission. She poured every dollar into scholarships, helping students like her brother chase dreams once denied. The building buzzed with life, young faces full of hope, laughter echoing through halls that had once been empty. For the first time in her life, Amara felt like she had a purpose larger than survival. She had turned a billionaire's empire into a machine for compassion. At night, she often thought of her mother's words. Kindness is the only thing death can't take from us. Those words guided her, reminding her that she had been chosen not for power, but for her refusal to let someone die alone when everyone else turned away. One evening, As she locked the doors, a soft knock startled her. She opened it to find Emily, Raymond's estranged daughter, standing there. Her eyes were swollen from tears, her pride stripped away. She whispered, "You were the daughter he always wanted." "I couldn't see it then." Amara's chest tightened. She didn't gloat, didn't smile in triumph. Instead, she reached out, pulling Emily into a quiet embrace. Two women from different worlds, bound by the same wound of a father's absence, finally found healing in each other's arms. The city lights glowed around them. Amara whispered, "Kindness saves us all." And in that moment, the story that began in silence and cruelty ended in a truth brighter than wealth. Because when no one else moved, she did. And that act of courage changed everything. Stories like this remind us that kindness and courage matter more than money or power. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Your support helps us keep telling stories that inspire change.